Every human being has always been unique. Everyone's different. That's biology. Uniquely different, we are nevertheless under powerful social pressures to be like everyone else. If we can't, we may find it hard to talk about with anyone we know. Isolated in this way by their problems, people are forced to seek the help of strangers. Every year, 500,000 people in Britain write to the advice columns in the women's magazines and newspapers. People have been posting their problems to advice columns ever since the 17th century, and although 300 years of undiminished popularity must imply some kind of basic need, these problem pages are still a subject that's hard to take seriously.
I had a great scorn of it. You know, I thought this was beneath any intelligent person to be doing.
In fact, a basic need is really there, and 500,000 letters a year are a sober comment on our society. If you spend a little time reading the letters, it's not funny.
I came back from lunch not so long ago to find a letter here on the desk saying, by the time you read this, I shall be dead.
The publicity given to these columnists establishes a kind of personality cult, and for many, the reply is a statement of ultimate authority. It's a huge responsibility for the journalists who have to find all the answers.
Mainly, it's made me much more aware of my own prejudices for what they are, because one thing that anyone working on an advice column has to be is at least to know where their blind spots are.
I shouldn't leave for one moment anyone ever sets out and says, I will be an advice columnist. I'd be very suspicious of anyone who did.
Today, we're starting with a young lady called Carol, and rather than putting a problem to us, Carol really would like to see a bit of a discussion about the situation of a childless wife.
Shamefully little research has been done on advice columns, in spite of the rich sociological material they provide. But some studies done in America and Britain suggest that these columns do reflect the fundamental anxieties of ordinary people, and quite clearly the letters do come from every strata of society. Indeed, none of the popular clichés about these letters is true. Only very, very few indeed are in fact written for a laugh, and certainly the columnists never make them up for themselves. To everyone but themselves, most of the people who write to advice columns are leading normal lives, and their letters certainly provide a unique view of life, life as it is really lived behind those prim windows among what is now called the silent majority. One person's problem is another's industry, and advice columns are to be found in almost every country in the world, including the Soviet Union. One American columnist claims 54 million readers a week. This makes her the most read person on earth. The biggest in Britain is Marjorie Proop's on the Daily Mirror, the largest circulation daily in the Western world. It devotes a whole page to the advice column every week. Marge has been working on newspapers since she was 18, has been an advice columnist for 14 years, but her age is secret. She is married with one grown-up son. She has an OBE. There's even a rose named after her.
Was that getting that word up? That'll do, yes.
Marge reaches 15 million readers a week, gets 50,000 letters a year, and answers all of them, although only a few hundred get printed.
Because it's not spelt like that, is it? No.
Because of the journalistic necessity of making the page readable, even amusing, the printed letters can't be representative. The page in the paper is only the very tip of an iceberg, the only public part of a vast private service. And it is private. As with all the columnists, any idea that the BBC might contact one of the correspondents for this programme was ruled out from the start, and the staff in this department is very carefully selected indeed.
Dear Madam, my eyesight is very bad, and if I should go quite blind, what should one do, please? Are there homes for the blind, please, where perhaps they might have me?
Since we have been married, my interest in sex seems to have waned. I enjoy intercourse, but I seem to want it less and less. It just seems that I am always making excuses to my husband and myself.
Now they are growing up, they need a father's guidance. I'm afraid I am so broken-hearted. I have felt like suicide many times, but the thought of them prevents me.
All the incoming mail is read on the same day and classified under headings like finance, illness, incest, marital upsets, masturbation, and so on, but all the urgent letters are dealt with at once. There can be few more depressing ways of spending your time than reading these letters, but trying to find the answers must be worse.
Dear Mrs. James, thank you for your letter, which I read with sympathy. Paragraph. I am sorry to hear about this sad situation.
The fact that all advice columnists delegate their work in this way seems to bear out the cynic's view of the whole operation. But in truth, the replies are always carefully researched and written according to very strict guidelines laid down in this office by Marge. And she checks every letter before it goes out, as they all do. It's the columnists who carry all the responsibility.
Now feels.
Do you think you do any good?
I don't know. I hope so. I think it's good if people know that there's somebody to write to that really does care about what happens to them and does want to help them. And I think that must be good. It must be good when somebody writes at the end of a letter, I feel better now I've told you, or I feel better now I've got this off my chest.
Are you trying to adjust people to fit in with the circumstances they find themselves in with society, or do you ever suggest that they might try and take action that would change their circumstances? How revolutionary are your answers, your private answers? We only see the ones, of course, that go in the paper, you see.
Well, if I feel that it would help them, and if I feel that they are capable of changing the direction of their lives, then I would suggest a direction in which they might go. But I think, on the whole, that it's very difficult for people to change the direction of their lives. If you get people who are in middle age and whose problem is the result of their own personality difficulties, then how can you get them to change either their feelings or their emotions or their mode of life or their attitudes to other people? You can suggest ways in which they might try to do this and suggest that it might help them if they could see the situation in this way or that way, and hope that your letter might perhaps help them to look at their problem from a different angle.
Some of the most pathetic letters up there in the office are the financial ones, the ones about it. gives you an insight into how people really live in this country.
It's very tough. It's very tough. And one of the tough situations is how many women particularly get into debt. This is awful. And awful when they get into debt and they write to me and say, could you lend me £45? Because I can't tell my husband. And this opens up a whole different spectrum. This inability of people who are married to each other and living, after all, in the most intimate relationship in which humans can live. And here they are, unable to talk to each other. A woman is unable to say to this man she is sleeping with every night, look, I've got into this terrible jam. I'm in debt to 45 quid. Help me. This, to me, is the awful thing.
Really?
And this same situation goes all the way right across the board. The whole pattern of human relationships is blotched by the fact that people can't communicate with each other. Parents can't communicate with their children. Children can't communicate with their parents.
You think this is the basis of a lot of sex problems?
I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it.
Do you think it's possible that writing about these sex problems in the journals and magazines, not necessarily in the Daily Mirror, creates problems?
I suppose there's a danger of that, but I don't think so. All these human dilemmas that we write about have been human dilemmas, I would think, from the time there were human beings. People are so ignorant. They are abysmally ignorant about sex. They're brought up romantically to believe that sex is what is doing what comes naturally, and you and I both know that it isn't. That sex is a technique and an art within the context of a loving relationship. And this sort of ignorance, combined with ignorance about venereal disease, combined with the total lack of adequate sex education in this country, and combined with lack of education about contraceptives, about everything relating to sex, produces 50,000 problems a year for me.
Do you get actual personal contact with the people at all, apart from the letters?
Yes, sometimes people come here, and a lot of people write to me. Yes, they come. Well, they come to the door, and a lot of people write and say, "I'd like to make a personal appointment. Will you meet me? Will you see me?" And I can't do it. It's impossible. First of all, I don't think I'm qualified to do it. I think this is a job for someone like you, not for someone like me. I think this sort of counselling does need training, specific training, that I haven't had. And therefore, I don't really want to see people. And also, because I'm not professionally trained, I think I would be apt to, if somebody was sitting here in this armchair facing me, telling me about their problems, I'd just be sitting here listening for 3 hours. I couldn't look at my watch, you know, like the psychiatrist, and say, well, time's up, next patient, please. I couldn't do it.
What sort of problems have you had?
Well, I have the personal problem, which I think a lot of people would find difficult to understand, of being a very insecure character. I always expect everything to go wrong for me. And you might laugh about this, and laugh if you want to, but I'm shy.
What's it all about?
I don't know what it's all about.
You've no insight into it at all?
None. I think it's very difficult to have an insight into your own problems, really.
Were you happy as a child?
Oh, yes, I was very happy. I had good parents. I have a sister to whom I'm devoted, although I wasn't devoted to her when we were children. She's 2 years younger than I, and when I reached the age when I realized there was such a thing as being pretty and such a thing as being plain, it soon became plain to me that I was the plain one and she was the pretty one, and I hated her. For years when I was young, I used to practice not smiling. You know, I used to go through a kind of drill of saying to myself, you mustn't laugh or you mustn't smile, because of these teeth. And you see, to go back to this question of my sister, she and I, curiously, look alike. But where I have this large nose, hers is neat. And we have very similar eyes, the same color, same shape, everything. But I have always had to wear glasses since I was 9 years old. And my sister has had brown hair. We both had brown hair when we were little girls. And her hair was about 3 tones lighter than mine, with kind of lovely colored lights in it. And mine was just dingy brown. And I was a thin, scraggy, short-sighted, plain child.
But does this anxiety about the body image still worry you? The worry about your face, this feeling of your looks?
Well, not as much as it did. Not as much as it did. Maybe I'm too old now to care any more about it. It still worries me sometimes.
But you must know from your work so well that some of the prettiest girls are the wallflowers.
Oh, I do know this. And
You know this?
And I tell my readers this. I try to reassure them. But it's because I know what it feels like to have this insecurity, I think, that I can write to readers about it.
Yes.
That I understand exactly how they feel. When girls write and say, I'm terribly shy and I can't face meeting people, then I know, I can see myself as this girl.
Have you ever considered having any kind of help in this? Or going to somebody and going to a psychiatrist or...
Some of my best friends are psychiatrists. I think that I know psychiatrists help a lot of people. And I think it's great that they can. I have never sought help myself for this reason. Partly because it isn't until I begin to talk about it now, like I am to you. This is a great self-indulgence for me, to be able to talk to you about this.
That's nice.
I'm enjoying it. And although I may have been born with funny teeth and nose and all the rest of it, imagination is something that I've got.
Wouldn't you do better to stop thinking about your teeth and your nose and mentioning them at every...
Well, you know, I haven't thought about them or mentioned them for ages until we started talking about them now, today. And so talking about them has made me think about them again. But I'm truly no longer tortured about it. I mean, I'm laughing away now, displaying my teeth.
It may be the shape of your nose, or it may be the size of your bust, but whatever the cause, a sense of imperfection is the second commonest problem presented to advice columnists. And who can hope to match up to the idealized world of advertisements, where only beauty is normal? But what is normality? Scientifically, there's only a distribution curve of probable appearance and behavior. Mankind has always been a collection of uniquely different individuals. It follows, then, that what is good for one may be the worst possible advice for another, as we all know. But with nothing more than a single letter to go on, without even seeing the patient, so to speak, the unfortunate advice columnist is not only expected to diagnose an entire emotional situation, but to define the obscure concepts of normal appearance and behavior. And to the people seeking help, she has all the authority of a doctor or a psychiatrist. Such is the responsibility of Evelyn Home.
Yes. By the way, with this quite seriously, you can trust in all sorts of things.
The woman who has to combine the femininity of Eve with the cosy domesticity of Home is, in fact, Peggy Makins. She's been Evelyn Home since she was 21, and for 34 years has offered advice on how to behave for literally millions. The very name has become synonymous with sensible behavior. Well, on what do you base your ethic, your standard of behavior that you expect from other people or that you expect from yourself?
Well, I have tried, I've tried living by various lights, as you might say. I was a very ambitious woman. I'm still fairly ambitious, I suppose. I'd love to be a good writer. I've tried to live my life for some long time now by what sounds frightful, the sort of law of love. But by love I don't mean anything to do with sex. I mean by the law of trying to do your best for other people.
How have the letters changed in all the years you've been doing it?
Very little, surprisingly little. Two big things. One quite amusing in a sort of funny way. When I began, every other letter said, "Dear Evelyn Home, I wish you'd tell me how I found a boyfriend. I am 18 or 22 or something, and I've never had a boyfriend, and if only I had a boyfriend, I'd be quite happy." And of course the awful thing was I was 21 and I didn't have a boyfriend. Nobody showed the slightest interest in me. Because now they're never looking for boyfriends. They always say, my difficulty is choosing, between Jim and Peter and Angus, and they're all so nice and so on. Another thing, of course, is that in the old days, girls of 19 or 20 would be asking me whether it was a good idea to go to bed with their boyfriends before they got married. And now, of course, they don't ask this thing. This doesn't happen. What they say now is, of course, my boyfriend said I must prove my love for him by going to bed with him before we got married, and now I'm pregnant and he doesn't want to know. So the thing has gone on a stage further. And there are whole kind of pendulum swings, bits of popularity, you know, among one's troubles. People used to complain of having an inferiority complex, which of course they couldn't know if they'd actually got. Nowadays, they're frustrated. They're terribly frustrated, and quite often they're awfully depressed. They're very depressed indeed, even if they're very young.
Because the thing one finds, of course, in seeing people and seeing patients is that one of the big problems is lack of sexual satisfaction.
Well, this surely is going to arise very often from a lack of wanting to please the other, of using sex entirely for your good and not for the good of both or for the good of the other. The emotion behind sex is, to my mind, a good deal more important, or a good deal the most important motive. You get an awful lot of people who simply want sexual satisfaction, and that rather as they want, you know, nougat from the sweet shop.
Do you give any criticism?
Oh yes, frequently, but only if it's going to be helpful, if I think it's going to be a bit helpful. I mean, I say, well, look, you are a conventional woman trying to behave like an unconventional one. The moment you realise it, you'll be a lot more comfortable, if you call that a criticism.
How much do you rely on your own judgment?
Oh, considerably, but of course I also use experts very widely.
How can an expert who's a psychiatrist, for example, really give you an answer that is really meaningful?
Well, it doesn't have to give me an answer. What I say to a person who I think needs psychiatry is go to your doctor, who will recommend a psychiatrist. Very occasionally, because I have known psychiatrists from time to time who would take people simply on my word alone, I have said, may I give your name to a psychiatrist who will be expecting to hear from you? Well, then I don't expect to hear any more.
In fact, you refer patients to psychiatrists.
Well, I'm rather like a hospital porter.
Evelyn Home, you do make the assumption that you have the ability to judge whether somebody needs to go to a psychiatrist.
Yes, I'm terribly sorry, I do. But this isn't difficult. I stretch it very widely, and many people, I suspect, who I say go to your doctor who may recommend a psychiatrist, probably don't need anything of the kind.
What are the qualifications for doing a job like yours?
Well, I wouldn't know because I haven't got any.
You've been doing it for a long time.
I've been doing it for a long time. I would think if there are any qualifications, it is a desire to see people enjoy their lives. I would think you probably wouldn't do the job so well if you just wished everybody to perdition, you know. It's if you start thinking about the qualifications for any sort of emotional straightening out, I don't think perhaps to be fairly happy yourself is a useful thing. But you know, maybe that's just my idea.
Have you been happy?
Yes, on the whole, I've been extraordinarily lucky and very happy in almost every personal relationship I've ever had. And that's been with workmates and the man I married and my family, on the whole.
Wonderful thing to be able to say.
Oh, perhaps it's been that it's rather limited experience.
Yes?
Maybe I haven't known enough people.
What has made you unhappy?
Other people's unhappiness.
Near to you, you mean?
Oh, no. I was sufficiently depressed with the state of the world when I was 16.
Was it the state of the world or was it the state of
me?
Peggy?
Well, a mixture of both, I should think.
So would you say, with all this experience, that you might be a slightly depressive personality?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes,
and that when you were 16, you were going through adolescent phase and you tended to be depressive then?
I've always tended to be depressive. I know this about myself. And I also know enough about it to discount it.
Do you think you do any good?
Oh, heaven, no. I wouldn't claim anything like that.
Do you do any harm?
I hope not. I hope not. I think probably not. I can't imagine anyone takes me very seriously.
So you spend all your time sort of writing a column that's really telling people how to go on, and yet seems like a dead loss.
Oh, well, I wouldn't have done... I wouldn't have done it if I'd thought it could possibly have any real effect on anybody, because I wouldn't want to be responsible. I mean, one isn't clever enough, you know, to know what is good for people. You can only say, all right, you're miserable this way. Have you thought of it that way?
And you don't think that there's any possibility that you're changing people's lives?
No, I would think there was no possibility whatsoever.
Backed by the power of the press, Peggy must have given more advice to more people than anyone in the country. And everyone in the publishing business relies on the fact that the printed word does influence people through the advertisements which pay the wages. Even the articles and stories perpetuate these myths of media land. You can't help wondering how much the magazines contribute to the very problems the columnists attempt to solve. And in the teenage magazines, even the problem page itself may be presented in a way which blurs the line between fact and fiction.
Oh, no. Mum and Dad are at it again.
What's the trouble, Anne?
The usual kind. My mum and Dad spend 20 hours a day fighting.
I agree, Anne. You can't go on like this. It isn't fair.
Leslie advises Anne to help out in the house, and here at least there can be no doubting the effectiveness of her advice.
I'm so glad things are okay again now, Anne. I like your folks, and I'm glad you're back in their good books now.
I've tried to talk about this with my parents, but they just won't listen to what I have to say. It usually ends up in an argument with my mother crying, and my father saying it's my fault and I'm breaking up their marriage. The thing is, it must be very late at night, coming home outside the house, and it must have that kind of dark, romantic light.
Lampposts.
Right, okay. Marcia, the thing is, you have a mother who absolutely adores you, and she wants you in early. And she's looking at her watch. But don't ham it up.
No, it's just sort of buzzing around.
Vincent, move your hand up a bit. It's getting a bit too sexy.
And as you come in, Marcia leans away towards me, but still looking at your watch. There, that's it. But Vincent, you can't...
The advice column in Petticoat always carries a photograph which illustrates one of the problems. And although the photographer and his models may laugh and ham it up a bit, the situation they are portraying is real and a source of genuine pain to someone. And the letter must be answered in these terms. Claire Rayner is in the hot seat on Petticoat, a teenage weekly with a readership of nearly 1 million. A state-registered nurse with training in midwifery, she's married with 3 children and works from her home in Wembley. She describes her highly organised job as a cottage industry, but it's certainly one with a difference. Here, all the advice given is laboriously researched, as usual. This is the raw reality of life and death.
See, I see it, Claire, that these columns in the magazines are the only real bit in the whole magazine.
Oh, bless you for that.
No, but it's true, isn't it?
No, I don't.
There's a substructure of reality, and then the whole magazine is filled with
So
fiction
what's wrong with a
and
little
fantasy.
entertainment? I
Nothing
mean,
at
what's
all.
bad with, you know, don't you like reading stories?
Yeah, but
Watching
if the
television?
society which these magazines reflect is creating these problems, you've got a sort of tip of an iceberg here, and the magazine is playing its own part in creating the problem.
I do get a bit uppity about this, I must confess. Listen, my editor's going to shoot me down in flames for this, but there are some things that appear in this magazine, as in others, that make me want to spit. The image of ideal girlhood today, looking like a refugee from a concentration camp. I could have a hang-up about this on account of I'm fat myself, you know, but I get too many letters from kids saying, what's the matter with me? I'm 5'5" and I weigh 8 stone, I'm too fat. You know, this is direct, you know, this is fashion advertising, and I do get angry about it. It's great if you conform. You don't have any problems, you see, but if the others, and there are far more who don't conform, of course, than who do, they think there's something wrong with them. Do you remember what it was like to be 16?
I do indeed.
There was that whole beautiful world out there, but you were being cheated. You weren't getting your share. I was 16. 5'9", built like a battleship. Nobody was interested in me. None of the boys were interested in me. I mean, when the other girls went off to the woods with a bad boy, I went to bed with a good book. I mean, you know, it was awful. I felt unwanted, unloved, hopeless. No one was ever going to want me sexually. What hope had I got, you know? So I feel very, very close to the kids who write now saying, what's the matter with me? I'm 14 and I can't get a boyfriend. I mean, 16 then, 14 now is about the same, you know. And then later on, the anguish of it, thinking things like when I did get a date, thinking, oh, what'll I do if I want to go to the loo? You know, the awfulness of this sort of insecurity.
Did you ever read advice columns? Did you ever write to them?
Never wrote to them, couldn't afford the magazines. As for stamps and things, I used to read them and never get my hands on them, you know, avidly. They used to annoy me sometimes. The ones I hated were those sort of cryptic bits at the bottom. Write to me privately, dear, and I will send you the answer. I used to think that was cheating. And to this day, I mean, I'm as explicit as I can be, because I can't bear this mealy-mouthed sort of thing. I was very bewildered by some things I read. I remember, for example, someone had written up asking about, I forgot, something to do with her anatomy, you see. And the answer described the little pear-shaped organ that was the uterus. Well, the only little pear-shaped organ I could find around my anatomy was the clitoris, and I was confused for ages. I had this vision of a baby growing. I really was puzzled. So here again is another reason why when I do write any anatomy, physiology or whatever, I try to make it as direct and clear as I possibly can. I mean, anyone can make mistakes like this, and you think you've got it across.
No, but one thing that strikes me about you is you tend to take an attitude. Let me just take this one. This is, I'm genuinely worried about my two best friends. I am very moral and do not believe in sex before marriage. My friends are very permissive in their attitudes and try to mould me into their way of thinking without success, as I am a virgin and intend to remain that way until I get married. I am not a prude. Tell me, just how can I help my friends? And you say, but you are a prude, and what is worse, a moralistic one who thinks she alone knows best what is good for other people. Now be honest, you say, you aren't really as nasty as your letter makes you sound, are you? I do hope you're not. Now, you're taking it out of her, poor girl, because she's being moral.
No. What has happened here is, it seemed to me that here was a child who's very insecure about her own attitudes, her own beliefs, and does what a great many adults do, in fact, tries to shore up her own idea of what is right and wrong by heaping blame on others. Now, this way lies disaster, it seems to me. If one can't say to people at 16 or so, look, love, don't go around making hard and fast judgments about other people. Don't try and mould everyone to your way of thinking. I mean, if you can't stop someone from doing it at 16, you're not going to stop them from doing it at 30. And I'm concerned.
Well, you put your finger right on it. That's the whole trouble with all this business. You people sit in your little cottage industry here or in the office in London or wherever it may be, and you keep making these judgments.
Hand on heart. Please,
not moral judgments,
no,
but...
I fall over backwards not to make a judgment about everyone. What I'm trying to do on this page, and in anything I do, is to come up with a situational ethic. What I'm trying to say to anyone is, look, this is the situation you're in. Here's your problem. What is the answer that will do the least harm to the people involved? Not the most good to you, note, the least harm to all the others.
What are then your attitudes to, first of all, sex before marriage, which seems to be fairly clear that you don't take a very
well, look, what is a marriage?
stringent view about that.
Well, let's get some definition of terms here. You know, a marriage is a public statement of a private decision. It isn't all that long, in fact, since betrothal was the same as marriage, and that once a couple were engaged, as it were, betrothed, then sex was part of their relationship. So I don't feel I have any right to make any judgments about whether or not someone should sleep with the man she's going to marry before they're married or not. That's their business.
What's your attitude about sex before the age of consent?
Difficult one, this. You know, the age of consent is something that's fairly arbitrarily set by law, you know. And 16 is very young for one individual. It's terribly, terribly mature for another. Once again, I cannot make a judgment in a general sense. Individually, maybe. There may be one girl of 18 who'll write and say, should I sleep with my boyfriend? I don't know. And she's so patently wanting out because she's just not ready for this sort of commitment that she's begging me to say don't. But then another 15-year-old will write with such maturity and such awareness of what she's about to do that I might as well tell the sun not to rise tomorrow or say, oh, do. Besides, it's no business of mine. But what I do say is, look, I cannot ever say it's wrong to make love. I can't. But it is wrong to make babies if you're not in a position to look after them. So I'll tell them about contraception. That's education. That's information.
What's your legal position? Here are you advising people you're an accessory after something or one of those things.
So. But all the same, I'm not about to shop anyone, if that's what you mean.
That's what I'm asking.
Good Lord, no. Bad enough that they can't trust, you know, the people who are closest to them. No, of course I'm not. And, you know, look, I regard my the confidentiality situation as seriously as any doctor would. I tell you something, perhaps a little more seriously than some do. I'll stick my neck out on that. Anyone who writes to me is absolutely guaranteed privacy. I will not ever shop any reader.
What about perversions, not in the sense of homosexuality, but the active use of
Well, you define
fetishes.
a perversion.
Well, I agree with you. I'm just
I mean, what is
it...
perverted? Look, any piece of human behaviour that hurts nobody, I cannot define as bad. OK, so somebody happens to be a fetishist, somebody happens to be a transvestite. So what skin is that of anybody else's nose? Now, if somebody's sexual behaviour is dangerous for other people. Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. This is a very severe problem that must be dealt with. But I'm not about to look down my nose at people who happen to have a fancy for fur boots or whatever. People, thank heavens, are more willing to talk about it now. Yeah. It's not something, it's not so sinful. I hate sin. I hate the whole concept of sin. I think it does more damage.
Oh, that's an interesting little one. Where does that come from? No sin? A world without sin?
Well, the whole, yeah, just people. The idea of an absolute good and an absolute bad, that this is sinful and this is virtuous. It's not real, is it? This isn't what life is like.
But don't you get the feeling ever that there's a huge background of a sort of social mores in the community and that you're busy here trying to repair it? To repair the results of it.
It makes me sound so big-headed, which heaven forbid I should ever be. I don't want to be. Look, I'm trying...
Nobody said you were repairing it. I just said you're having to try and repair it.
I don't even to attempt anything. It was such an arrogant thing to do. All I see myself as doing is providing information and a sounding board and a mother figure as an alternative to Mum if she's got, for some reason, they don't want to talk to her themselves. And there's no one else, is there? It's all wrong. I mean, it shouldn't be like this. It makes me very angry that people of 15, 16 and 17 still in touch with school should have to write to a total stranger like me.
It's a good idea, but how else could it be? I mean, you're suggesting a sort of National Health Service kind of...
Counselling centres, yeah, why not? If the Marriage Guidance Council can run counselling set-ups, if the Family Planning Association can, I don't see why on earth we can't have centres where people with the whole range of emotional problems can go. There are some, of course, as you know, and thank heaven for them. I send people all over the country to them. Tell you something, if you've got an emotional problem, you're about 16, it's all right if you live in London, it's all right if you live in Birmingham, not too bad in Manchester. You know, there are centres where I know it's all right, but there are vast areas on the map where, God help you, if you're 16 with a problem, there's nobody who's interested. And that is if you can't go to your mum, which unfortunately a lot of kids can't, or if there isn't a teacher at school who gives a damn for you.
What about the possibility of doing harm, possibility of a suicide?
Yes, one's terribly, constantly worried about this. And this is where my nursing training comes in tremendously handy. I was trained to look for the two diagnoses, what the client, the patient, whoever is actually saying and what the problem is underneath. And of course there's this backup service I use, and I think all advice columnists do. There's some splendid people without whom I would be totally lost. Samaritans, heavens, they're marvellous. The Family Planning Association, the Marriage Guidance Council, the Church of England, all the churches for that matter, the Salvation Army. There's a whole range of people, quite apart from the individual psychiatrists whose brains I pick till they bleed, and gynecologists and physicians, all sorts of people I knew in my nursing days that I still ring up from time to time and say, help, what do I do for this one? And they tell you, we do our best. And sometimes one gets involved in a long, involved chain of circumstances. You start off by saying to someone, look, I've got this problem, this particular reader, now what do we do? And there's a lot of correspondence goes on before that reader is finally, as it were, left to get on with her problem.
Do you ever hear what happens to the people who write to you?
Not very often. People don't often write back, but sometimes they do. I'll often put at the end of a letter, P.S., let me know how you get on, I'd love to know. But they don't often bother. It's a pity in a way.
Even though they seem to work in a vacuum without any follow-up, the advice columnists who cater for the young obviously do provide a great deal of badly needed help, especially for adolescents. There is a particular need in adolescence to appear perfect in the eyes of both your parents and your friends, which can make most adolescent problems unmentionable. But the greatest unmentionable of all at any age is sex. More than half the people who visit GPs under the National Health Service are really suffering psychological difficulties, most of which are associated with sexual problems. Many of these derive from sexual ignorance. The degree of ignorance is truly astounding.
We thought we could overcome our feelings, but I guess we just weren't strong enough. To relieve our feelings, we indulged in oral intercourse, not any other kind. I am certain I am still a virgin in the medical sense, but I have heard so many stories. Please tell me, is it possible to become pregnant this way? I am 2 days overdue. It may not seem much, but believe me, for the last 3 weeks I have been nearly out of my mind wondering if I could be pregnant.
That letter was written to Marge on the Mirror. It's not that people don't want to know, they don't know. In fact, the demand for sexual information is so great that a magazine like Forum, devoted entirely to questions and answers about sex, can appear without having to take any advertising. The questions are often bizarre, to some pornographic, but the answers come from a panel of highly qualified experts and must make their own contribution in the field of preventive medicine. At the centre of it all is Forum's 27-year-old associate editor, Jane Furbank. Aren't you surprised with the amount of sex education, films, books, magazines going on, that people are still writing to a magazine like Forum?
One can only assume that sex education isn't getting through to where it's needed. We get letters from school children who must have received education in this day and age, showing the most elementary ignorance. And we get letters from a lot of people over 40 who missed out on it first time around and perhaps for various reasons never caught up on it.
What sort of extreme versions of sexual ignorance have you come across here?
Well, I think the strongest case was a couple that came to our personal advisor service. They'd gone on their honeymoon. They'd both come from rather repressed upbringings, and they'd been told that something beautiful happened. So they got into bed and waited. After a week, they went home quite crushed. Nothing had happened. Nobody told either of them that you actually had to do something.
That's a wonderful picture, just lying in bed waiting for something to happen.
That's right. If you saw our post, you'd realise just how serious the problem is, the pathetic letters we get. People who are really frightened, really anxious, and very often about things which actually aren't problems at all, what one could call pseudo-problems. Young boys who are worried because their penises are 4 inches shorter than they think their penises ought to be. You know, this sort of thing, because they've got these false expectations and stereotypes. And they don't realise that really in real life nobody has a sex life, like the sort of sex life that they think they should be having. Or boys writing they're 20 and they've never had a girlfriend. You know, they don't believe there's another male virgin over 16 in the whole country. They're unique.
No,
it's happening to everybody else.
Or reading the papers, you think this almost would be true. You know, this impression you get that everybody's just getting into bed with everybody else is the impression you get from the way it's reported. You get a very different picture.
If there was really a sexual revolution, we wouldn't have newspapers and magazines talking about sex.
That's a point. Are you working yourself out of a job then with this Forum? I mean, is there going to be a point when Forum has done such a good sex education job?
That's a very utopian thought, but in a utopian state, Forum would be completely irrelevant.
You must have a lot of this reporting back on how the doctors handle these situations. What's the impression you get?
With something like oral sex, I think the doctor's probably extremely embarrassed. And of course, this isn't a subject that's covered in the medical schools.
No, of course it isn't. That's the trouble. It is absolutely true. We had a suggestion from Claire Rayner that there's such a need, such a lot of sexual ignorance in the community and so much sexual disability that it'd be a good idea to have a kind of an advice service on the National Health Service.
I think something like that is desperately needed and would more than pay for itself. If you look at the case of, say, a man with a sexual problem, his wife is unhappy, his kids are unhappy because he takes it out on them, his work falls off because he loses his self-confidence. Eventually you can have the community paying for divorce, for care of the children, for support of the wife, his economic productivity falls off. A service that stopped all this in the bud would more than pay for itself. We do have a small service of this kind of our own. People come in here and see a psychiatrist or doctor, an entirely confidential consultation. They get an hour. And it's better than nothing. Very often all they needed was straightforward medical facts, and once you can give them that, they go away happy, and that 1 hour has solved something that could have been worrying them for a long time.
You take all this very seriously, don't you?
I'm afraid I do.
It means a lot to you.
Yes, it does. We do a lot of good, and we get so many letters saying that we've helped people. This is the sort of thing that keeps one going, because sometimes the amount of unhappiness seems really overwhelming. It can become extremely depressing. The trouble with a sexual problem is when you don't have it, you just don't see how sex could be so important to anybody. But when you've got it, you can become completely obsessed. It can affect every area of your life.
And I'm sure there are an awful lot of people wanting to ask, how does a nice girl like you, so to speak, come to be associate editor of Forum?
That's a very loaded question.
It is, isn't it?
Because the corollary is in a dirty job like this. So perhaps first of all I should say that I don't think it's at all dirty.
Of course it isn't a dirty job.
Basically it arises out of an interest in psychology. I've always been very interested in it. I was working in publishing, became extremely bored with the lack of content of what I was doing. In fact, I didn't think it was worthwhile. And I saw an advertisement in the Times. It was as simple as that.
What was your background?
Oh, usual sort of background. Girls' public school education. Went to Oxford, but walked out of after a term because I became bored with the subject.
That's a very usual background, yes. I'm
Yes.
with that. How was the public school, the girls' public school?
Well, I hated every minute of it.
You did?
I knew I didn't wanted what the school was pointing one towards having. I'm sorry, I said that better. I knew I didn't want what the school was wanting us all to have.
Yes.
I didn't want to marry some respectable stockbroker or country gentleman and dispense good works. I didn't want to do the 2-year secretarial course. I'm not stretching my brain too much, you know. Equally, I didn't want to go and become extremely academic. These were the alternatives that were offered to us. Either we ended up as deans of women's colleges, or we ended up as middle-class married women, you know, dispensing Christian ideals in all directions.
What has been the effect on you of working on Forum then, you personally?
Well, to be frank, when I first started opening the post, shall we say, there were times when I was shocked and there were times when I was disgusted. And there were times when I thought sex just isn't that, can't be that important to so many people. But very rapidly, in a week or two, you find a real kind of compassion. You stop feeling disgusted. You think, poor whoever it is to have a problem like that. Even if it's something very bizarre, they can only make love in a very bizarre situation. You stop thinking of it as being something vicious or nasty and think of it as being something so limiting and restricting.
What sort of things make you angry, Jane?
One thing is the callousness that people have about sex. We accept that everybody has different tastes in every other area. When it comes to sex, we think everybody should feel as we should, and that we have to feel the way that educators, Christian morality, etc., tells us we should feel. The other big aspect of it is that sex is so abused and so distorted. We use it to sell things, we use it to promote things, and yet on the other hand, you say anything honest about it, and you're in real trouble. On the other, you can describe violence in the most loving, lascivious, and sadistic detail, and that's all right. You try and say something explicit about sex, and unless you're very careful, you're in prison.
The advice columns may seem a curious way to deal with the secret neuroses of society, and all the columnists agree they only tinker at the very edges of the real problem. But they do at least provide a shoulder to cry on for people forced to seek the help of strangers. We are conditioned to a fear of judgment if we reveal the truth about ourselves because we insist on judging others, with the resulting tragedy that when we are most in need of support, we find ourselves most isolated.